Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Skull Session Recruiting Podcast brought to you by BuckeyeHuddle.com. I'm Mark Givler. Got Kevin Noon with me here today. It was a very busy recruiting weekend for Ohio State. 4 commitments this past weekend. We've profiled 2 of them already. So for this episode, it is a commitment episode, but it's kind of a delayed commitment episode / positional outlook. We're gonna talk about Deshawn Stewart, the 4-star safety out of DePaul Catholic in New Jersey. We're going to kind of break down his commitment, talk a little bit about him as a player, and kind of give an overview of the secondary right now, because something is eventually going to have to give here with all of the defensive backs they are in on and leading for and landing commitments from. So that'll be kind of the topic of this episode. We'll have another episode running for you here shortly where we go over receiver recruiting. And so you'll get back-to-back episodes here here in the next 24 hours. So, but this one will be secondary centric. First of all, Kevin, I guess how surprised were you about this one? We talk about all these other defensive backs, and several of them were on campus. And it's Stewart that comes out of the weekend with pulling the trigger and Ohio State accepting the commitment. This, to me, really kind of shakes things up a little bit as far as their secondary recruiting.
Yeah, I was surprised. Now, once Des Jones out of the same high school committed, I was like, well, now this is something to watch, and we didn't have to wait all that long for it to happen. But if it would have happened in reverse order, I would have been completely blindsided. I would have been like, I've heard the name, but I don't know a whole lot about him. I had just enough time to look at his video right before he committed. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm down with that. I understand it, but 6'2", $190. Some databases had him listed as a corner, certainly listed as a safety by most. I think that's where you look at him. But to get to the main crux of things, we thought we knew what Ohio State's board was going to look like. I mean, with what's already in, the kids that they're already, still pursuing, be it Fahim Delane, be it McNutt or Brew. And then Stewart crashes the party. And I'm going to say, I'm going to use that term liberally. I mean, he crashes the party, so to speak. And now you wonder, does that mean that they're looking in different directions, or is the party just going to be bigger than we anticipated?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question at this point that the party is going to be bigger than we anticipated. My immediate kind of thought process went to, well, did something happen on the visit with Dorian Brew, with Fahim Delane, and the answer is no. I think Ohio State's still very optimistic about Fahim Delane. I think Ohio State's still feeling pretty good about Dorian Brew, who's kind of a corner safety hybrid, which we'll kind of get into a little bit here in a minute. But this was just a guy that they like at a position of need. And I just think we're going to have to readjust our expectations on the numbers. I was thinking 6 defensive backs, maybe 7 on the high end if they kind of hit it on everybody. Now it looks like 7's going to be the low end, and this could push to at least 8. Can they get 9? I personally don't think they can, but I think we're now moving the goalpost from 6 or 7 to 7 or 8. And so how they try and balance this out, and we'll get into the domino effect here in a minute, but it's going to be interesting to kind of see how they navigate these next few spots, because there's a lot going on right now with defensive back recruiting, which again we'll get into here in a minute. But Deshawn Stewart is, as Kevin mentioned, was listed as a corner by 1 or 2 services. He's being recruited as a safety. He's not a corner for Ohio State. He's a safety. Good size, good athleticism. I think we have some film here we can kind of show people. This is a program that Ohio State's been familiar with over the years. And again, he's one of those guys who, again, is going to play. You're going to see a lot of corner film at the high school level because of his size and athleticism. And this is a guy who reminds me a little bit of Jordan Fuller, because Jordan Fuller coming out was about the same size, about the same type of athlete, played corner at the Army Bowl, And I think everyone kind of figured he was probably going to move to safety at Ohio State. I don't know that it was as set in stone as it is here with Deshawn, but a guy who has tremendous ball skills, a very physical kid. Uses his length and size to get hands on a lot of passes. And I think he's just probably best suited for safety. Maybe not quite the explosiveness you might get out of like a Devin Sanchez, who's a similar size athlete. So with that said, you probably move him over to play like a free safety role. But I like the film, and I'm one of those people who, yes, there are some true safeties out there. Like, Caleb Downs coming out was a true safety. Even like Von Bell really wasn't. I mean, there's been Malik Hooker was. This works with like the true safeties, but I'm more of the guy. I like to take the corners and move them to safety. I think the more guys you can have on the field that can cover, the better. There's so many ways now for offenses to get you into a situation where your safeties are in man coverage. And so I'm all for it as far as taking corners and moving them to safety. I think that generally is a good practice.
Yeah, I'm watching the film here, and if you are listening to us on one of the podcasting channels, be sure to check us out also at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. And he's not afraid of contact. He's not afraid to lower his head and hit. Now, then again, the way that defense has been changing over the years, you better make sure you see what you hit and hit what you see, or you're going to get flagged. But I mean, he shows the physicality of somebody who can play safety. Now, is he Jaden Bonsu going out there and just, blowing people up? Well, maybe not exactly, but he's also not a guy making a lot of business decisions of being like Olay and letting guys go by him. So, I like what I've seen in the tape, and I really had the opportunity over the last couple of days to watch it a couple of times, and I think Ohio State is getting itself somebody who probably a little underrated, and depending on the rankings. On the 247 composite, he's a 4, but I've seen him just on the 247 standard rankings as a 3. I think he's going to be somebody who ends up as a 4, certainly just because of some of the schools that were interested in his ultimate commitment to Ohio State.
Yeah, I like him as a low to mid 4. Again, I see so much Jordan Fuller there. And Jordan was ranked similarly as Deshawn is right now, but just again, sure tackler. Cover skills, ball skills, size wise, they're pretty similar. So that was kind of my immediate, and obviously Jordan's a Jersey guy too. So that was kind of my immediate thought process when I started really kind of diving into his film. Now we get into what this all means. So I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but I have to keep repeating it because I feel like that's the way this is going to go. And I don't know how Ohio State's going to avoid it. Is they're not going to hit, as I called it on our site the other day, at like the 8 or 9 man parlay here. Eventually, whether it's someone currently in the class or someone they're pursuing who's not currently in the class, somebody is either going to lose a spot or make their own decision that, this is maybe not the ideal situation for them, and maybe take a closer look at some of their other options. Who that is actually going to be, your guess is as good as mine. Sorry, I don't really have a lot more to say on that, but like when I look at things individually, I think they're in great shape for Fahim Delane. I think they're in pretty good shape for Dorian Brew. I think they're in pretty good shape for Trey McNutt. I think they're in amazing shape for Cody Haddad, who, oh, by the way, just decommitted from Wisconsin. And you got to think that one's going to go Ohio State's way. You probably got to think that one's going to go Ohio State's way pretty soon, because I don't know why he would have opened things up from Wisconsin. He may make a few other visits, but he's not opening things up from Wisconsin to go to some other Big Ten school. It's not Ohio State. I mean, this is to me a almost a surefire in the class guy at this point for Ohio State. So when does this become a thing of like, who's going to be guy number 8 or guy number 9 who's like, maybe I go to this other top 10 program because there's just too many bodies here?
You see, when is, really a big question, because, obviously if Ohio State believes it can get to 8, we'll just use 8 as a number. then it's incumbent upon Ohio State to convince all 8 players that it believes it's going to land and would land, that's the right number, and there's more than enough opportunity in long seasons and playing guys, and I mean, elder statesmen will be leaving the program and there'll be more opportunity. But I think that once you get closer to the upcoming high school season and attention starts to turn away from what is in the longer term, my recruitment, to what is going up for my senior season of high school football, I think that's when maybe some more thought goes into this. I guarantee you anybody recruiting against Ohio State is letting these guys know, how are you really going to find your path to the field when they've got this guy and that guy and that guy? I mean, and you're in here, and we're offering you a much more reasonable path to seeing playing time. So, I think that you get through the spring, and I think you even get through much of the summer. But I think once you get into the fall, that's when things can happen, whether or not it's somebody who we think is going to be in never materializes because of that, or maybe somebody who's in the class and feels that they've already kind of been recruited over leaves. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we're really kind of speaking on hypotheticals at this point. I mean, the only thing I'm pretty sure of is I don't know how you have a 9-man defensive back class when you missed your number at end, and as we're going to talk about in a show coming up here very shortly, I mean, you probably need more receivers than you realize. I mean, this is going to have to be like a 40-man class or something if Ohio State's going to hit all these numbers.
Yeah, this is going to be fascinating. And, there's all the usual suspects here. So, again, they've got the 3 corner commits already. We've got Trey McNutt and Dorian Brew out there. Cody Haddad's out there. Here's another name. Jaden Hudson was on campus. 4-star safety from California was on campus this weekend. I've got a story I'm going to be running on him today. Loves Ohio State. Gushed about the visit. Puts out a top 4 Ohio State's on it. Coming back for an official visit in the summer. Like, that's a name now that has to be thrown into this mix too. Like, this isn't just the same 8 guys we've been talking about. Now Stewart's in, so now you're at 9 guys that we're kind of focused on. Now Hudson's talking about you as a top contender for. That's 10 guys. Like, something's got to give here. Now, this is an unbelievable problem to have. This is the best of problem you could possibly have, I think, if you're Ohio State, is trying to figure this out, that you have too many good options in the secondary. And you certainly need a lot of safeties. You've lost a couple to the portal. You moved Sonny Styles down to linebacker. Lathan Ransom's gone after this year. Jihad Carter's gone after this year. Caleb Downs is gone after next year. You're basically looking at a couple of young guys right now, and that's it on a team that probably needs to have 6 to 7 safeties. I mean, you're playing 2 or 3 something. I mean, sometimes you're playing 3. I know they've kind of transformed the nickel's kind of more of a corner role now, but there's times you're playing 3 safeties. So to have a full 2 deep at that point, you really need 6 at least. So they do have to replenish the safety room, and they do have to replenish the corner room. I think they're going to lose their top 3 corners after this year. I mean, there's no reason to, Denzel Burke and Jordan Hancock are going to be gone. Is Davison Igbinosun going to be back? Not if he plays. If he takes a small step up from what he played. I thought he played at a very high level last year. He takes another small step up at his size, athleticism, competitiveness. He's going to be a first-round draft pick. So you may be losing your top 3 corners after this year. And then you look, and Jermaine Matthews is the next guy up. Well, next year, Jermaine Matthews is a 3rd-year player. What's to say Jermaine Matthews couldn't be in the NFL, after next season, the year Caleb Downs goes to the NFL. So there's a lot leaving the program right now. So I get that they need all these guys. I just don't know how they're going to convince every guy they want that this is going to work. And again, it's just the thing I've been saying for a couple months now. It's not so much that I can sit here and tell you they're not going to get this guy or they don't lead for this guy. It's not even that. I think they do lead for pretty much all these guys, save for maybe Jaden Hudson. But you can't. You're not going to be able to convince 8 of these guys to do this. You're going to have to at some point tell somebody like, hey, or someone's going to do that for you. They're not going to hit this parlay. And I wish I had more answers as to like who they're going to miss on, because right now, again, from an individual standpoint, it looks great for everybody. But eventually someone is going to look at this and be like, nope.
Yeah, I mean, if you are one of these 8, 9, 10 players, and I mean, and some of them are already committed, so then let me move them into a different bucket. But if you're one of the uncommitted players, do you move quicker to try and secure a spot? Do you slow down to try and see how things play out? If you're in now, does that mean you're in later? I mean, what happens if some guys slow down and we're still looking at the same board of 10 and 2 or 3 more names emerge? I mean, I'm not betting against Tim Walton out there on the recruiting trail. It's, there are no answers really at this point. They're just, I mean, I don't have any certainty of what this class is going to look like exactly. I mean, I certainly feel strongly about where Devin Sanchez is in this class in terms of his position. I mean, I certainly feel strongly about things like that. But beyond that, I really don't know. But this is, this again is a different type of problem of, hey, we can't fill our class, or hey, we're going to watch our class fall apart for one reason or another, a various reason or another. This is Ohio State is so hot in terms of its defensive back recruiting, and it's becoming kind of a destination place. And you've got all of these top names that won in the class. And as we like to say so much, something's got to give. And I don't know when that's going to happen, who that's going to happen to. I don't see a world we live in where Ohio State takes 10 DBs unless they take the 85 scholarship limit and put it up to like 100 or something, because you just can't do that especially when you look at needs at other positions as well. And you can beat the table the loudest and say, I need 2 more guys in my room or whatever, but I guarantee you there are 4 of your peers doing the same thing.
Yeah, eventually Ryan Day is going to cut you off. Eventually he's going to tell you, nope, we're full. Sorry. Yeah. And then, the other thing, this is all a really good, so, we're not really, I'm not complaining here, but we're just kind of talking through how this is going to have to play out. At some point, if you are Ohio State, I don't know if you pressure guys to commit right now, because here's what you don't want to have happen. Here's the way you don't maximize this, is if you take a whole bunch of guys now and kind of force them into the class, and then come November, you'll lose 2 of them to decommitments to what they perceive to be better opportunities. Because now you've probably passed on guy 9 and 10 that we're talking about right now. And now you lose guys 7 and 8. Well, now you're 2 off your number, and you've already missed on a couple guys you really liked because you had to cut it off. So I think if you're Ohio State, you just let this play out organically. I wouldn't be pressuring anyone right now, because what's going to happen now is if you get someone in at, who's the 5th or 6th guy in, whatever we're at right now, and then 3 more guys come in behind him, that could change that mindset of guys who are in, and you don't want to lose anyone late, if that makes sense. You don't want to have a decommitment late where you're not getting plan B, because you already told plan B, hey, we're full. So plan B's off the table. So now you're down to like plan C. So what you want to do is kind of grow this thing organically to where you're adding a piece here and there. But I know everyone's like, oh, they should tell whoever it is, Cody Haddad or Trey McNutt or Dorian Brew, like, hey, we need to know if you're in or not. I don't know if that's really even the best way to do it right now, just because we're 8, 8.5 months from signing day. I mean, that's an eternity of recruiting.
About 8 months. Yeah. Well,
So,
I think the thing is you have to be honest with these guys. You have to sit there, and we've talked about for years and years and years and years, recruiting is a relationship business. As long as you're honest with them. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to come up with answers to questions that aren't being asked yet. But if questions are being asked, you have to be honest, because if you're deceitful, if you're being sneaky or any of that stuff, it's going to turn around and bite you in the butt. So as long as you're being honest, hey, our plan is to take this is the number we're shooting for. And if your real number ends up being maybe a little higher, I mean, again, we've talked about that for years. Oh, they've got 2 running backs in this class, but maybe they take a third one if it's off of this short list of players, and then you go there. But I think that honesty is the best course of action, and I think that every player is going to have to view it differently. I think if you're Haddad from Ohio, I mean, maybe you're right. You're not decommitting from Wisconsin to then go to Illinois. That's not the move. And that's not saying that Illinois is a lesser program than Wisconsin or anything like that. You're an Ohio kid from a school that should be sending Ohio kids to Ohio State. It's pretty obvious what that move is. I mean, if I'm Haddad, I probably would make a move sooner rather than later, but go out and have a couple visits. Why the hell not? But yeah, you don't want to artificially speed anybody up. You don't want to artificially slow anybody down. You just kind of need to let things happen.
So that's going to be the interesting thing to watch here the next couple months, I think, because a lot of these guys are, Fahim Delane and McNutt and Brew, those guys will be, some of them will be back on campus this spring. I mean, I would expect some of them will be back on campus for the spring game or in the next couple of weeks. So the guys who aren't will be back in June. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see at what point does Ohio State say, okay, we're full, because at this point, I think it's going to be 8. If they can get to 8, I think they'll take 8 because you've got 3 corners. I think they need to probably take 4 safeties at this point. Do I think Dorian Brew's a corner? No. Do some schools think he's a corner? Yes. Does Ohio State think he's a corner? I don't know about that. I think they're willing to start him out there and see if he can play corner. So he's kind of in hybrid territory there. So, I mean, I think that gets you to your 8. And whether that's someone leaving the class and getting backfilled by another guy, or whether it's just them getting to 8 and saying, nope, that's it. I don't know exactly how they're going to get there, but I think that's the number I think that could be the number. And that's crazy for me to say. It's funny. We always do this every year. This will be the 2 tight end class that never happens. Or this will be could they take 3 running backs or take 6 offensive linemen? And it never happens. And this is the year where I think we're like understating some of these positions. Like, oh yeah, maybe like probably 6 defensive backs at the beginning. It's like, no, we've taken more than 6 defensive backs. So I think that could be happening at 1 or 2 other positions as well. We'll get into it in another show, but just to sum up, Deshawn Stewart, I think a really good player, a really talented player out of a really good program, really good part of the country that Ohio State wants to continue to be active at. Again, I see a lot of Jordan Fuller there. I think Ohio State's a virtual lock, regardless of how weird this gets the next few months, a virtual lock to sign the number 1 secondary class in the country. So these are all like great problems to have right now, but they are things that are going to have to be addressed here in the next 2 months. I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see how this maneuvers, or how Ohio State maneuvers through all this. But they're rolling right now. I mean, it is what it is. It's like I said, it's much better. We've talked about this before. It's much better to be sitting here thinking about how they're going to whittle down all their targets into a class than sitting here looking at a position and being like, boy, they need 3 more guys at this position. And I think they lead for 1 guy left on their entire board, which we've had to do at some certain points with certain positions. So first world problems. But Kevin, any final thoughts here as we sign off on this kind of secondary update / Deshawn Stewart breakdown?
I think it's more important than ever, if you're not a member of Buckeye Huddle, to join us at Buckeye Huddle, because things are constantly changing and evolving in the recruiting front, and we try to keep you updated here on the channel, but obviously over at Buckeye Huddle, you're going to get stuff instantaneously as we learn it through the skull sessions from Mark and everything else. So, it's going to be a wild ride. Buckle up, buckle in, because, just because, what we think the board may look like in March and April isn't necessarily what the board is going to look like in October and November leading up to a December signing day. So, you're watching this show, so obviously you care deeply about recruiting. So, come to the source of it and be able to get that up to the minute information.
Yeah, I mean, even if you just do a month, if you give us a shot for a month, that's going to get you through the spring game, through spring visits. It's going to get you through at least half of our Southern Swing. If you haven't followed us in the past for the last, decade or so, we've been going down southeast part of the country, and we stop at high schools during spring football practice in the South, and we watch practice, we watch scrimmages, we watch what workouts, everything else, and we get interviews with all of Ohio State's top targets from Florida and Georgia and everywhere else. So you'll get a good chunk of that tour that we do on your first month. And so it's a great time to get in for recruiting coverage. And the one thing I will say, we don't give away our map before we do it, because quite frankly, it's impossible to do it this far out in advance. We usually put it together about a week before we leave, and then usually one or two things change anyway.
It changes on the road.
But I will tell you with pretty high confidence, this will be the most states we've ever covered. There are two. There's going to be at least 2 new states.
I mean, certainly without us
never
getting
stopped in on
this year. I mean, remember the year we did Texas and we did Arizona. That was the high water mark at that point. But yeah, we're gonna be hitting a lot of states. We
got at least 2 new states. Really, I think 3, but I think one might be up for debate. But we've got 2 new states we're going to cover that we hadn't had to stop in before on Southern Swing. So it's going to be, it's the most loaded list I think I've ever put together. So unless like 8 of these guys commit somewhere else in the next 4 weeks, which is going to happen, it's going to be the biggest list we've ever done, the best list we've ever done, and the most states we've ever done. So that'll be a great thing. If you guys haven't joined us for any of these before, it'll be a great 2 weeks of recruiting coverage. So appreciate everyone watching. Appreciate everyone listening. Well, like I said, we'll get you another episode here the next probably in a few hours on YouTube, but it'll be the next day or so for sure. But thanks again for your support, and we will talk to you again soon.